Good morning. Happy Wednesday to everybody out there. Um, I'm going to take a few minutes this morning and we're going to pop the hood on one last Bible translation, or maybe two of them, depending on how you want to look at it. Um, I imagine this will be the last week that I'm looking at various Bible translations. If there's one that I have not covered that you'd like for me to, mention that in the comments on Facebook or here on the YouTube channel, and I'll cover that next week. Um, so for today, I'm going to look at one last Bible translation or translations. These were asked by my sister Amy out in Arizona. So Amy, this is for you. So for today, I'm going to mention the Holman Christian Standard Bible, and then its successor, daughter translation, however you want to put it, the Christian Standard Bible. Um, so a little bit about the nuts and bolts of these. I will confess right up front that I do have a copy of the Holman Christian Standard Bible, but have not read much through it yet. Um, I do not have a copy of the Christian Standard Bible, and so everything I mention about it is just what I have read about it. So, with that as a disclaimer, the origins of the Holman Christian Standard Bible, as the name implies, is done by Holman, which is part of the publishing enterprise, if you will, of the Southern Baptist Convention. It was published by Lifeway. Um, so it right off the bat, it is published and by the publishing arm of the Southern Baptist Convention, which would be, I mean, it'd be just like if Cokesbury um, paid for and organized a Bible translation to be used in the United Methodist Church, or Abington Press did. It's exactly the same. Um, so the origins for this are interesting to me. Um, they it came from a desire within the Southern Baptist Church to for another Bible translation to use instead of the NIV in their curricula. They've got their Sunday school curricula and curricula for other activities, and apparently the NIV had sort of been the default translation, and the NIV is a good translation, nothing at all wrong with it. But apparently their royalty fees were fairly high for that, and some people were a little concerned about how the NIV progressively in the last 20 years in updates had heads closer and closer towards gender inclusive language, and so there came a little over 20 years ago a real desire for um, another Bible translation that they could use in house for for their materials. Two people were initially contacted. Two biblical scholars were initially contacted about putting together such an animal, and at first it was going to be based on the New Testament was based on the Textus Receptus, which is the textual basis for the old King James. If you remember, the King James was based on the manuscripts that they had in 1600, and they were like 8 different manuscripts that all dated back to like 1000 AD. Currently, we have access to many more manuscripts that are far older than that. But there's still a loyal following. The Textus Receptus has a loyal following because that's what King James used. And initially, they were going to use that Textus Receptus for this. Um, what had been the basis for the King James, and they switched mid-course to uh, take the New Testament from the critical text, which is really, in my opinion, far better. Older, more accurate manuscripts. The New Testament was first published in 1999, and then the full Bible came along in 2004. So in timing, this is sort of right about the same time that the Message was done, which I referred to last week. Um, the translation philosophy um, behind the Holman Christian Standard Bible is a little more literal than the NIV, but not quite as literal as the New American Standard or the ESV. So if you imagine this spectrum, you got the Message way over here, and then the New Living Translation, and then the NIV, and then um, the most literal be like the New American Standard, and then the ESV, and then the Holman Christian Standard Bible somewhere in here. One of the curiosities of the Holman Christian Standard Bible is that they, in some cases, they wrote out the term Yahweh, the divine, the holy name, the divine name for God. In most, in the vast majority of English translations, where um, the the name Yahweh is used, it's written in our English Bibles as Lord. In the Old Testament, this is in the Old Testament. It'll be written as Lord, and it'll be all caps, be Lord in all caps, and the ORD will be in small all caps. If you're reading through your Bibles, you'll recognize that. Um, the Holman Christian Standard Bible was apparently fairly popular within Southern Baptist circles, but it never gained much market share. It never gained a whole lot of traction on the broader market outside of their own internal circles. Um, and for better or for worse, one um, one of the driving forces, one of the factors that is always considered in doing a Bible translation is sales, it's marketing. Um, it made, I'm not saying that that's good or bad, but it's a reality. And um, with the Holman Christian Standard Bible never really taking off in the broader market, Broadman and Holman, Lifeway, the publishing enterprise for the Southern Baptist Convention, decided that an update to this Bible was needed, and they agreed to start on this work. And I think this was in 2016. Um, and for this work, they employed a team of people, Old Testament scholars, New Testament scholars, to do the actual translation work. They also used as an English stylist Michael Card, who is a phenomenal contemporary Christian artist who has um, great biblical imagination. They used him as sort of an English stylist, um, and this became, as the work began, it became a more and more a different translation, and they even changed the name of it. So the resulting work would be the Christian Standard Bible rather than the Holman Christian Standard Bible. There were some significant changes between the two works. Um, whereas the Holman Christian Standard Bible, the parent translation, had um, used used Yahweh in some places in the Old Testament. Um, the CSB just used Lord in all caps, Lord. It was always sort of apparently sort of weird the way the Holman Christian Standard used Yahweh. They didn't use it consistently. It wasn't all the time, but just some of the time. And so it was never really clear why you do it in some cases and not others. Um, and the CSB decided to adopt for what they call gender accuracy. And this would be sort of a philosophy similar to what the New American Standard 2020 did. Um, so, like I mentioned, with that revision of the old NASB, Gender accuracy is not really gender neutrality, but you're just aiming to be accurate. So if you've got a case where it literally says man, but you know that by implication that it's not specifically a male, but any person, the CSB, like the NASB 2020 revision, would say a person or one. Um, they they still tend to use a generic he pronoun rather than trying to finagle sentence structure around that. One of the criticisms that some people have of the New Revised Standard Version is that in trying to create something that is strictly gender neutral, they have to do some they have to butcher the English language to accomplish that sometimes. And you read it and you feel like they didn't think really long enough and hard enough about how to make this into palatable English. Um, if truth be told, I, I I sort of like this way of doing um, gender language issues, sort of aim for that gender accuracy. Um, we don't need to use mm, man all the time. Use person or use one. Um, the generic key is just for English style. That to me, that's a good place to aim, but that's just my opinion. Um, there were a fair number of instances, apparently, and this is just what I've read in terms of reviews. I've read reviews of both of these translations. There are a number of instances where the CSB, the Christian Standard Version, Christian Standard Bible, um, tweaked the phrasing of the whole of its parent translation, tweaked the phrasing to make it more traditional sounding. Um, the so if you are more accustomed to the cadence and the feel of something that is strictly within the King James family, like King James, New King James, Revised Standard, English Standard, or even New Revised Standard, some of the phrasings in the Christian Standard Bible will feel more comfortable to you because they've tweaked them a little bit. Um, they aim for in the Christian Standard Bible, they aim for sort of a middle point between literal and a phrase for phrase, this middle point between um, as close as you can come to word for word, which would be like the New American Standard, middle point between it and something like the New Living Translation. They aim for a middle point, so their translation philosophy is going to be similar to the NIV or the Net Bible. Um, it's not formal equivalence where you're trying to get exactly the form of the original languages, and or dynamic where you're aiming for the main point of a phrase. You're sort of aiming for the midpoint, like the NIV. Um, like I said, I've got a paper copy of the Holman Christian Standard Bible. I do not have a copy of the Christian Standard Bible. Based upon the reviews that I've read, um, it appears that just based on reviews, that the Christian Standard Bible was a good upgrade. That it was that there were a number of significant improvements over its parent translation, and so again, just based on reviews, the CSB was a really good upgrade from its parent, but I can't vouch for that firsthand because I do not have a paper copy of said animal, but I did do a little bit of reading about it. Um, so anyway, that is the Holman Christian Standard Bible and its successor daughter translation, the Christian Standard Bible. Um, so if you are curious about them or see one of them on the bookshelf in a bookstore, that's where they came from. And hope the rest of your day is great.